जय गिरिवरधारी। जय यशोदानंदन जय ब्रज जनरंजना जय ब्रज जनरंजना। जय यमुना तिरवनचारी जय कुंज बिहारी। जय राधा माधव जय कुंज बिहारी। जय राधा माधव जय कुंज बिहारी।
जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तरशत श्री श्रीमद हिज डिवाइन ग्रेस अभय चरणारविंद भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी श्री प्रभुपाद की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की ताय गौर प्रेमानंदे। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम Canto 6, Chapter 17, Text 18. संसार चक्र एतस्मिन् जन्तुर अज्ञानमोहितः भ्राम्यन् सुखं च दुःखं च भुङ्क्ते सर्वत्र सर्वदा। संसार चक्र एतस्मिन् जन्तुरज्ञानविमोहितः भ्राम्यन् सुखं च दुःखं च भुङ्क्ते सर्वत्र सर्वदा। संसार चक्र एतस्मिन् जन्तुर अज्ञानविमोहितः भ्राम्यन् सुखं च दुःखं च भुङ्क्ते सर्वत्र सर्वदा। mohita brahma sukham cha dukkham cha samsara chakre, in the wheel of material existence. Etasmin, this, jantuhu, the living entity, ajnana mohitaha, being bewildered by ignorance, brahmyan, wandering, sukham, happiness, cha, and dukkham, distress, cha, also, bhunkte, he undergoes, sarvatra, everywhere, sarvada, always. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Deluded by ignorance, the living entity wanders in the forest of this material world, enjoying the happiness and distress resulting from his past deeds, everywhere and at all times. Therefore, my dear mother, neither you nor I am to be blamed for this incident. As confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 3.27, Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashah ahankara vimudhatma karta miti manyate. The bewildered soul, under the influence of the three modes of material nature, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by nature. Actually, a conditioned soul is completely under the control of material nature. Wandering here and there, always and everywhere, he is subject to the results of his past deeds. This is carried out by the laws of nature. But one foolishly thinks himself the doer, which in fact he is not. To get free from the karma chakra, the wheels of the results of one's karma, one should take to bhakti marga, devotional service of Krishna consciousness. That is the only remedy. Sarva dharman parityajya mam ekam sharanam vraja. Om ajnanatimirandhasya jnananjanishalakaya chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai shri gurave namaha. Nama om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami iti namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So today we are continuing our three-part discussion on the topic of why do good people do bad things. So the first part, where we discussed four main points, that how these two things, that when bad things happen to good people and when good people do bad things, both of these are challenges to our faith. And then we are going to discuss this in three broad parts. Say, for example, if there are two good people and say something bad happens to us. So the first session we discussed in terms of the intentions or motives of the other person. In the second, we are going to discuss today in terms of the causes. How do we see the cause? And the last part will be discussed in terms of actions or responses. So that means broadly we are trying to understand when something bad happens, especially something bad is done by a good person. then how do we see it? In terms of how do we see that person, how do we see ourselves in terms of the big picture of what has happened, and then how do we respond? So in terms of intentions, last time we discussed that there could be 3 broad levels of intentions. Anyone remember the 3 incidents? Not yesterday, they were yesterday. Ignorance. That person just didn't know what is the right thing to do. So sometimes an authority figure takes strong disciplinary action against someone when that person is actually not done anything wrong. Maybe because they just heard one side of the story and they were not told about the other side of the story. Now you could call that as ignorance, or we could call what is that as? So what is the second thing? Incompetence. That means maybe they just don't have the experience or the expertise, the skill set to actually take up that particular role. Sometimes a good person may do a bad thing because of incompetence. And lastly is, it's a little complicated word, malevolence. Malevolence is basically malice or ill will, where a person out deliberately wants to hurt us. So in general, we could say is apaishunam. We try to start with the least negative explanation. Don't assume that the person is evil. When they have done something wrong, start with the least negative explanation that is good for our health, mental health, and also for the health of our relationships. So now that's one aspect. And now we are going to, within a various set of possible responses that are available, we will also try to through philosophically understand which response Chitraketu chose and how that is understandable. So, or what that means for us. So in this case, in terms of these causes, what did Chitraketu see it as? Why did Parvati curse him? Was it malevolence? Certainly not. It's somewhere between ignorance and incompetence. Ignorance, she thought that he was making fun of Shiva and her. He was being arrogant, he was being sarcastic, he was being disrespectful. That's why she did that. So now in terms of causes, how do we see the reason why something like this happened to us? So one of the problems is, so I'll talk about this in 3 parts. So, for philosophy, weaponized. I'll explain what this means. That sometimes Shastra can be used as Shastra. So the weaponization of philosophy. And then knowledge, I'll talk about the second point is how philosophy misapplied or misused is an example of knowledge in the mode of ignorance. I will discuss what this concept is. And then lastly we'll discuss is philosophy and purpose of philosophy. So how do we understand this? So just recently there was this historic moment for the broad Vedic tradition when the Ram temple was inaugurated. And now the overall, I was just there also, the overall mood is very celebratory. Very, of course it has been restrained, thankfully overall. So Modi quoted, this is not just time for Vijay, it's also for Vinay. We don't just want to be proud of our victory, we also want humility. So overall, the mood has not been very violent, either way, from either side. But there have been some interesting criticisms of this made. And I've been trying to address some of them as they came up to me. So one of them is that, you are building a temple of Ram, but you have forgotten the teachings of Ram. Now, what's interesting? What is the teaching of Ram? It says Ram himself taught that everything happens by your past karma. So if the temple was destroyed, it was destroyed by past karma. Your own philosophy teaches you should accept what happens as past karma. Isn't it? And the example is given is that even if you consider the temple destruction unfair, Kaikai did something unfair to Ram. She had him exiled. And Ram accepted it. So, what is the use of building a temple of Ram if building that temple is at the cost of forgetting the teachings of Ram? What do you think about this? Well, the first point is, this is Ardha Kukutanyaya, isn't it? Okay, Ram accepted his exile as past karma. But when Sita was abducted, did Ram accept that? That's also my past karma? He did not, isn't it? So the point is, sometimes we ourselves may not understand our philosophy. We may take only one point from the philosophy. So basically this is called as, in general, this is called weaponization of knowledge. That means you use knowledge as a weapon to beat someone down. Now anybody and everybody can do it. It can be done for a good purpose, it can be done for a bad purpose. But Shastra can become a Shastra. So weaponization of knowledge, you take some information and then you use that information to beat the other person down. Well, no. When the question comes up, why are you taking only that information? Why not take some other information? So, okay. So the point is, in our tradition, the most important principle is, the most important teaching is not that, oh, everything happens by our karma, so we should accept it. That is definitely an important teaching. And it is definitely a much needed teaching. But if we start taking it like this, if karma were the sole explanation for everything, then let's look at three broad aspects to it. Karma is an explanation, but is karma the sole explanation for everything that happens? Okay. If that were the case, then let's consider, why are there branches of knowledge like Ayurveda? Now what is Ayurveda doing? Ayurveda, if you see, it is, we may call it spiritual knowledge, but it is actually material knowledge. Material knowledge used for a spiritual purpose. Now if somebody's stomach is upset, the Ayurvedic doctors don't say, okay, you know, Vaishwanar is angry with you, that's why your stomach is upset. Now Vaishwanar is the god in charge of digestion, Aham Vaishwanaro Bhutva, it's manifesting of Krishna. But if somebody's stomach is upset, what happens over there is, you look for a material explanation for that phenomenon. Okay, there's some imbalance in the bodily system of functioning. So within the tradition itself, if everything that happens were due to past karma, then why would we have any form of treatment at all? Isn't it, you're getting sick, it's by past karma. And if you try to interfere with that sickness, then you're stopping your past karma from coming upon you. That karma is going to come to you some other time. Just accept it. Well, not really. We will explain why it's not exactly like this, but this is simple. Ayurveda is a whole branch of knowledge which is dedicated to countering things at a material level, not just going into karma. Now, where does karma play a role? We will discuss that. But it is not just escalating it to the level of karma all the time. Now, we may say, okay, Ayurveda it's mundane. We are devotees. Okay, that's true. Now let's consider Prabhupada's example. You know, when there was a Rath Yatra in London, the first Rath Yatra, what happened was, among Prabhupada's disciples, many exalted souls, but they were also young, in 20s, 30s, 40s. And youth means there's a lot of Rajoguna. So there's a lot of competition, and Prabhupada channeled that competition through book distribution. So when the devotees did the first San Francisco Rath Yatra, Prabhupada was so happy and that news spread all over. So the devotees in London decided that we will also do Rath Yatra and we'll make a bigger Rath than what was there earlier. And they made the Rath bigger, but they didn't make the wheels correspondingly bigger. And it was a big event, And the Rath went for a short distance and he just collapsed. It's a total disaster. It's a PR nightmare. And then the devotees wrote to Prabhupada, Gurudas, Prabhu and others. He says, Prabhupada, did this Rath collapse because of our poor devotion? And Prabhupada replied, it collapsed because of your poor engineering. So Prabhupada, again we see, Prabhupada is not going to some distant explanation. Just Krishna wanted it to collapse. Prabhupada looked for some immediate explanation. So Prabhupada looked for some immediate explanation for what happened. He did not get into anything like that. It's all your past karma. So there is, I'll explain how this works. But there are abundant contrary explanations that are, not explanations, courses of action or choices that don't stick to this conformity to this unipolar idea. Everything that happens is our past karma. Well, there is something more going on over there. Or something closer to hit at home. See, when something bad happens to someone, say something bad happens to a devotee. Now at that time, how much should we escalate this to the level of either past karma or Krishna's hand? That it depends. I was in Europe, I was in UK, and one devotee couple came to meet me. They were Europeans and they had relocated to London. And this Mataji is telling me that first they were reluctant to talk, but he says this is very important for us. Then they started talking and they said that they had been married for several years and they were trying to have a child, and they had almost like 4 miscarriages, and it's very painful for anyone, but 4 is horrible. And then this Mataji told me that I heard in a class Krishna said in a preacher's class. Now anyway, I'll tell what he said, then I'll tell what I think of what he said. So he said that abortion is murder. If you ever abort your child, Krishna will ensure that you will never have a child. And now, then she said, before I was introduced to bhakti, then I had an abortion. So is it that Krishna is going to punish me for that? And Krishna is never going to let me have a child? Now I said, where is, I said, I won't mention who was that spoke such a thing in a class. My point is, where is the Shastric Praman for this kind of one-to-one correlation? Now, there are so many people who have never had an abortion and they may have a miscarriage. And if you see in the Western world today, almost every person has, every woman, the situation is such that in almost every person, or maybe not every, at least half people have probably had abortions. People are still having children. So, is Krishna a God who kills babies in the womb just because you did some karma in the past, particular action? So he says, should we just accept this as past karma? Should we accept this as Krishna? So I was telling us there are times when Krishna consciousness can be harmful for our Krishna consciousness. What do I mean by that? See, we bring Krishna into areas where Krishna is not the cause that is responsible for that. And it is not that when Dushasan was disrobing Draupadi, Draupadi was not thinking actually Krishna has come as Dushasan, Krishna is disrobing me. Horrendous to think like that, isn't it? So we see there are multiple levels of causes for things. And we don't escalate everything to the level of the cause is Krishna. See, Krishna is the cause of all causes, not the cause of all effects. There are cause of all causes means like the rain, the example given in Vedanta Sutra in our tradition is that without the rains, no vegetation will grow. So the rain is the cause of all vegetation. But which specific vegetation grows where, the rain is not responsible for that. Isn't it? So Krishna So basically, the idea of escalating everything to Krishna, everything to past karma, that is not our essential teaching. Now I'll talk about, this is the first point. The weaponization of karma can be done for anything. Weaponization of philosophy can be done for anything. And this has been done in our tradition. Many of the young children who were then Gurukulis and they were abused in schools. One of the common refrains that was told, if you're abused, why are you in such a big deal? It's your own karma that you suffered. Well, if it's your own karma, is that an explanation? Did Yudhishthira tell Draupadi, it's your own karma you suffered? Did Ram tell Sita, it's your own karma that you're abducted, stay abducted? So, where is somebody who is a victim of injustice being told it's your own karma, just suffer it? Now we will talk about karma is a very important teaching, no doubt. But every teaching has a context and a purpose. So what is the basic principle of karma? The first point I discussed is we should avoid the weaponization of knowledge. What is weaponization of knowledge means? There is knowledge and then there is an agenda. So for example, you should just, we started with somebody saying with the Ram temple, just, you should just let the temple is destroyed, let it stay destroyed. So, okay, you are using philosophy, but what is the agenda over here? The agenda is clearly anti-Vedic. It's anti-Ram, isn't it? So if somebody is saying, whatever happened to you, injustice, atrocity, it's all your karma. What is likely the agenda? The agenda is most likely washing your hands off, irresponsibility. Common sense, is it that if we consider the 4th canto, when Prithu Maharaj is confronted by his citizens saying that we are starving, and does Prithu Maharaj say, it's your own karma, just tolerate it? He doesn't say that. He does something material to fix it. What does he do? He arranges for food grains. So the problem with knowledge in the mode of ignorance. So why does this kind of weaponization of knowledge happen? That's why in the Bhagavad Gita there's Jnanam, Gyeyam, Jnanagamyam. Jnanam is knowledge. The 3 words are there. Jnana, Gyeya and Jnanagamya. Now different acharyas have analyzed this differently. The way I find it the most reasonable or most intelligible. So Jnana is simply knowledge. Now what knowledge means can be analyzed further, but there's the object of knowledge. So object of knowledge means what is it that I'm trying to know. So in physics, for example, the object of knowledge is the material world, the physical structure of the material world. That's object of knowledge. And Jnana Gamya is the objective of knowledge. There's a difference between the object of knowledge and the objective of knowledge. Somebody might be doing Bhagavad Katha, but if their primary interest is in how much donations I am getting from it, then the object of knowledge is Krishna, but the objective of knowledge is money. So Krishna is saying Jnanam, Gyeyam, Jnanagamyam. We understand that knowledge comes from Krishna. We understand the object of knowledge, ultimately whatever field we are studying, whether we are studying architecture, whether we are studying physics, whether we are studying cooking, ultimately Krishna pervades all of existence. So Jnanam, Gyeyam, the object of knowledge also ultimately Krishna for us. And most importantly, Jnanagamyam. The objective of knowledge has to be Krishna. So when there's knowledge in the mode of ignorance, this is actually a very paradoxical concept, knowledge in the mode of ignorance. Because normally we say knowledge and ignorance are 2 opposite things, isn't it? Yet, but what does knowledge in the mode of ignorance mean? Normally we would think that, say, if this is a spectrum, if here is knowledge and here is ignorance. So if knowledge increases, then what happens is ignorance decreases. So in that sense you would say tamso ma jyotirgama. So that's the broad understanding we have. The increase of knowledge leads to the decrease of ignorance. But what does knowledge in the mode of ignorance mean? So let's see what Krishna says. Yattu kritsnavad ekasmin karye saktam ahetukam atattvarthavad alpam cha tad tamasam udaharutam. So Krishna says, essence of the knowledge in mode of ignorance is, he says, knowledge of one thing. Kritsnavad ekasmin. Knowledge of one thing is made into knowledge of everything. Basically, making one thing into everything. That is knowledge in the mode of ignorance. There is a saying, those who have a hammer think that everything is a nail. Any problem, just use a hammer to slam it. But no, there are many different kinds of tools required for different purposes. So when knowledge of one thing is made into knowledge of everything, that is essentially knowledge in the mode of ignorance. What does this mean? That actually in this case, our knowledge increases. But the increase in knowledge does not decrease our ignorance. The increase in knowledge actually increases our ignorance. Now we may say, how is that possible? Because it is knowledge only about one thing, at the expense of everything else. At the expense of everything else. That means, say, this is how nowadays there's a lot of concern over bias, prejudice. So people have some preconceptions. So what happens is, if people decide, people from this region are like this, people from this religion are like this, people from this community are like this. And then, once we have that opinion, so if, say, we have a bias about someone, now somebody may have an experience of that. We might be cheated by people from a particular community. People from this community are not trustworthy at all. Now, when that happens to us, then we start looking only for examples that reinforce our idea. And then what happens is, yes, there may be many people in that community who have acted in a cheating way. But there may be many more who don't cheat. But we look only at examples that confirm what we believe. And then the result of that is, we have a lot of knowledge. Like somebody can give 50 cases of people from that community being cheaters. Okay, that may be true. But then you may have 50,000 cases of people from that community being honest. Isn't it? Well, what about those? Those are neglected. People just look at the same cases. Whenever I go to America, especially when I speak to Americans, this is a common challenge. The belief over there is like Hindus and Muslims in India are at their necks and are constantly killing each other. Well, yeah, there have been riots and there is some unrest, some tension. But actually, if we look at it per capita, we'll compare the population of India versus the population of America and look at it per capita. The black versus white violence in America per capita is more than the Hindu versus Muslim violence per capita in India. But there is a big narrative that is created. This happened over here, that happened over here, that happened over here, that happened over there, that happened over there. There's an accusation, Now we often are concerned about Christians are converting so much. So, well, there is truth through that. And now there is a government proposing that there should be a ban on conversion. Now, philosophically, whether a state should mandate whether people can choose their faith or not, that is something which we are, as a movement, are discussing about it. There are some devotees who say, no, of course it should be banned. But philosophically, the whole point of the state should not be interfering in what faith people have. So there are some parameters which have to come in. There are dishonest conversions which can be stopped. Because tomorrow, if the same is applied in America or elsewhere, then how can we preach? Isn't it? We cannot have it one way only. But the point is that from the Christian perspective, the whole narrative in the West is that, oh, Christians are being persecuted, churches are being destroyed. Now, have churches been destroyed? Of course, they have been destroyed. But if you look at it, overall statistics, during the same time when churches have been plundered or somebody has been robbed, some crime has happened associated with the church, actually in that same period, statistically, more crime has happened against temples. Because India has more temples, and more temples means temples will also be subjected to crime. So whether it is targeted violence against a particular community or it is general crime where everybody becomes targeted. So a narrative can be formed. And once a narrative is formed, what happens is people can say, oh, this happened here and that happened here and that happened here, that happened there, that happened there. That's true. All that may be true also. It may be distorted, but even if we grant it is true, see, just a set of true facts does not necessarily convey the truth. It's a very important point to understand. In an argument, you may give 10 true facts, but that does not necessarily mean the conclusion of the argument is true. Somebody may quote 10 statements from Shastra, but their conclusion may be opposite to that of Shastra. Where is the example for this in the Bhagavatam? Somebody quoting Shastra to defeat the purpose of Shastra? Yes, our old friend, isn't it? Hiranyakashipu. He quotes Atma Gyan at basic level. Philosophically, it's not much different from what Krishna speaks to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. But he's using Atma Gyan to defeat the purpose of the Atma Gyan. Isn't it? What his purpose is? Therefore, because the soul is eternal, therefore I'll continue performing austerities till I become powerful enough to kill Vishnu. Wow. It's amazing. Somebody recently sent me a clip of a Bollywood movie where there was some hero. He just goes out on a vendetta. You know, there is vendetta movies, or what do you call it? Vigilante movies. Where some vigilante, the person takes the law in their own hands and destroys everybody who is considered to be lawbreakers. And yes, there might be criminals, there might be politicians, there might be businessmen. So anyway, this person goes around killing everyone, and whenever he kills someone, after killing someone, he quotes the Bhagavad Gita, Nainam chinnanti shastrani, nainam dahati pavaka. Now, the soul's eternality is by no means a justification for violence. If that had been the case, then Krishna could have finished the Bhagavad Gita in the second chapter itself. Isn't it? The main reason, see, generally when somebody has a concern or an argument, somebody is opposing us. So there are two ways to deal with opposition's arguments. Start with their weakest arguments and work up to their strongest arguments. But if you are really confident, start with their strongest argument. If you can refute their strongest argument, then all the subsequent arguments, their opposition will be much lesser. If you can actually defeat their strongest argument. The strongest argument that Arjuna has for not fighting, he says, Katham Bhishmam Dronam cha. He says, how can I, Katham, what is that? So it's 2.4 in the Bhagavata. Katham Bhishmam Aham Sankhe Dronam cha Madhusudana. So he says, how can I fight against Bhishma and Drona? So the first point that Krishna tells Arjuna is that actually we are souls. And therefore, Nainam Chindanti Shastrani, that verse comes after Vasamsi Jirnani. The point is they are going to get better bodies based on their actions. So it takes the strongest argument out. But Krishna doesn't use that alone. Okay, so you are not going to hurt them. You are actually going to benefit them. But that alone is not the basis for deciding whether you should fight or not. But that argument is dealt with. And then Krishna goes into analyzing what is the right thing for Arjuna to do. So that's why the question often comes in the second chapter. After giving Atma Gyan in 2:11 to 30, why is Krishna going down to Karma Kanda, 2:31 to 37? That's because they are two different subjects. One is, how can I kill Bhishma and Drona? Actually, you are not killing them because they are souls and they will go to a better place. Then should I fight? Then Krishna addresses that from the basic level, Karma Kand, to Karma Yoga, then to Dhyan Yoga, then to Bhakti Yoga. then to Gyan Yoga, and ultimately to Bhakti Yoga, like that over the chapters. So the point is that you cannot take one verse from scripture. Somebody can take 20 verses from scripture, because all the 20 verses in second chapter are about the eternality of the soul. But that cannot be used for justifying indiscriminate violence. Okay? So the point I'm making over here is, knowledge in the mode of ignorance means we just take one point and make it into everything. And when we are doing that, we take that one point and file multiple points to support that one point. But what happens is a set of true statements, or we can put it here even as scriptural statements. A set of true statements, scriptural statements, that does not necessarily lead us to the truth. Truth could be, it could be a factual truth, or it could be a scriptural truth. Truth is much more nuanced. That's why we have to be careful to try to understand what the overall teaching of scripture is. And then, and that is, knowledge in the mode of ignorance will only lead to more and more polarization. And this polarization is coming more and more in this world today. In America, and especially much more in Europe, anyone of you has heard this word nuns? Nuns are people who say we don't follow any religion. None. So we are not Hindus, we are not Muslims, we are not Christians, we are nuns. This is not the Christian nuns. That's completely different. Nuns is we don't follow anything. And their whole reason is that, it's not that they are fools, some of them are, but not all of them. They have valid points. Some of them say, you religious people, you argue about the nature of things in the other world. And you make things worse in this world because of that. So it's better to have nothing to do with religion. And to whatever extent there has been fanatical religion, that has been the result of that. So the point is not just, okay, you can have arguments. There's a valid space for that. But those arguments, philosophy should not be at the cost of our culture. It should not be at the cost of our humanity. It should not be at the cost of basic tenets of existence. So philosophy is not to be weaponized. This is a big subject, but we take it one statement and make it into everything. Prabhupada, I mentioned this last time and also I had come in. Prabhupada met this Mishra. So Mishra was the person at whose stage Prabhupada had stayed and under yoga studio programs. In New York he had stayed and he tried to preach. And then after that, many years later when ISKCON had started, this Mishra came to meet Prabhupada. And Prabhupada met and they had lunch and they had a nice chat. And after that, Giriraj Maharaj asked Prabhupada, I thought he's a Mayavadi. Prabhupada said, yes, he says, philosophically we argue like anything. But culturally we are friends. So what does this mean, culturally we are friends? That means, yes, a person has a particular philosophy, but that philosophy is not meant, we don't reduce a person to their philosophy alone. People are complex beings, multifaceted beings. Their philosophy is only one part of who they are. They might be associated with Mayavadi organization, but culturally they might be very supportive of, say, the Vedic culture. They might still want to do Go Raksha and they might protect temples. So we can see when scripture, if we consider a person, their philosophy might be only one part of who they are. Their culture might be there. Their overall nationality. They may love the country. They may be patriotic. They might be charitable. They can have so many other features. They might be very rational, scientific. And that could make them spiritual. So philosophy is only one part of a person. We can't reduce the person to the philosophy alone. Similarly, we can't reduce Shastra to just one statement. So that brings me to the last part, that we want to avoid knowledge in the weaponization of knowledge of scripture happens because of knowledge in the mode of ignorance. So how do we avoid that? So basically in our tradition there are two distinct things. There is karma and there is dharma. Now the word karma itself has many different meanings. And I will discuss those meanings if it's required. But dharma essentially is the right thing to do. So why is it that Lord Ram accepted Kaikeyi's actions and did not retaliate? But he did not accept Ravana's actions, he retaliated. Because when there is decision making, the Vedic tradition for decision making is not karma centered, it is dharma centered. It is not what is whose karma, it is what is my dharma. So Lord Ram said that, okay, I was going to ascend the throne as a service to my father. And now, as a dutiful son, I was going to ascend the throne. As a dutiful son, now I'll go to the forest. So it was a dharma-centered decision. When Sita was abducted, the focus is not on what is whose karma. The focus is what is my dharma. So she's my wife, I have to protect her. So decisions have to be made based on a dharma-centered approach, not a karma-centered approach. Now while deciding what is our dharma, we consider karma as one factor. By karma, now here the word karma has many different meanings. As I mentioned, karma can also refer to, but we are looking in terms of past karma. What actions have we done in the past? That's what is generally being referred to. Dishtam, the previous verse had mentioned that. So we all get certain amount of distress and happiness by our past karma, which is true. But does it mean that our present actions don't matter at all? The whole essence of the philosophy of karma, the jnanam and jnana gamya, the essence of this is that our actions matter. Our actions matter, therefore act wisely. Don't think that we can get away by wrong actions just because nobody is holding us accountable. Right? The essential point of the principle of karma is our actions matter. So karma is actually a very empowering philosophy. It's very empowering. It's not, the essence of karma is not that you have done something in the past and therefore you have to go through the situation, you have to suffer this and you have to suffer that. That's one side implication. But the core implication is our actions matter. If we make good choices, we will have a better future. If we make bad choices, that will make our future worse. So our actions matter even when they don't seem to matter. Now there are mitigating factors over there. So the idea is, in this sense, karma and dharma are not unrelated. Karma will lead us to dharma. Then acting wisely is dharma. So if we truly understand the philosophy of karma, the focus is on dharma. So why did Prithu Maharaj not tell his citizens, oh, it's your own past karma that you're starving? Because that is not his dharma. If he is the king's purpose is to provide for the citizens. And that's why, what is my dharma? To provide for them. And whatever is required, I will do it for that purpose. If a parent is not able to, if the children in the family are starving, can the parent say, it's your own karma because of you are starving? Obviously not. Isn't it? It is, you have to accept. It's what is my dharma right now. So in general, in Mimamsa and Nyaya, the two systems of philosophy, where the key principle is how to analyze, how to contextualize, how to understand scripture. That has been analyzed a lot. And one simple but vital principle is when we are looking for explanations. When something has happened, when we are looking for explanations, start with the drushta explanations, then move towards the adrushta explanations. Start with the visible explanation first. Start with the immediate explanations. What does that mean? Say if somebody eats a dozen ice creams, on a cold night. And the next morning, they have a terrible throat. No, they eat ice cream and the next morning they say, ice cream. Isn't it? So now, if their throat is terrible, is it because of past karma? Well, yeah, not past life's karma, past night's karma. So, it is only when the drushta explanation does not make sense that we move toward the adrushta explanation. We start from the drushta. Say right now if I am feeling cold, maybe I am feeling cold because I am not wearing warm enough clothes. So, it is not that when I am feeling cold, it's my past karma, so I should suffer. No. If in spite of wearing warm clothes, still I feel cold, then I understand maybe someday I got some disease and the disease has come because of past karma, so let me tolerate it for some time. We don't go toward the adrushta explanation immediately. That's what Prabhupada also did when he said the Rath cart collapsed because of poor engineering, not poor devotion. He says when there is a drushta explanation, when there is an immediate explanation, there is no need to go towards an invisible explanation. So going back to that Mataji was talking about who had 4 miscarriages. I talked with her husband and he said, I said, have you found any biological cause for this? And she said, yeah, she has some syndrome because of which this is very vulnerable to that. And she says, is it treatable? I said, yes, we are trying for it. And she's following some diet and something like that. So I said that, when you have a biological explanation, focus on that. There is no need to go to any invisible explanation over there. And this was about 2.5 years ago. So after that, the Prabhu called me and he messaged me. He said, they were expecting and they have a child now. So there's no need to bring Krishna. So I said, you don't have to bring Krishna into everything. See, when we say be Krishna conscious, what does it mean? Be Krishna conscious everywhere. That means not that Krishna is the cause of everything. That is a very different thing. This is not our philosophy at all, that Krishna is the cause of everything. There are many intermediate causes that have to be considered. What to be Krishna conscious everywhere means to see the opportunity to serve Krishna everywhere. Now, but how exactly I am to serve Krishna where? That will vary according to time, place, circumstance. So in every situation, there is an opportunity to serve Krishna. That is essentially being Krishna conscious. So Prabhupada could have said when he was preaching in India and there's no results, not much results were happening. His Guru Maharaj had said, if nobody comes to the classes, speak to the walls. Prabhupada said, maybe this is Krishna's plan for me. For the rest of my life, I'll speak to the walls. Prabhupada did not see Krishna consciousness from that perspective. So every situation is an opportunity to serve Krishna. Now how exactly I'll be serving Krishna, that will vary according to time, place, circumstance. And Prabhupada, when his outreach was not successful, Prabhupada came up with a material explanation for the ineffectiveness of his outreach. What is the material explanation? Indians are very infatuated with the West. The Indian infatuation with the West has nothing to do with spirituality. In fact, as you can say, it is a lack of spirituality. But Prabhupada looked for a material explanation. And then he came up with a material solution. We could say the intention is spiritual, of course. But the Indian infatuation with the white skin, what is that? That is just material, isn't it? Prabhupada used one material illusion to counter another material illusion. One material illusion is, Indian spirituality is old-fashioned, it is impractical. Another material illusion is, white skin is so, anybody with white skin is very special. So Prabhupada used the second material illusion to counter the first material illusion. His purpose was transcendental, no doubt. So the point I'm making over here is that knowledge always has to be seen in the light of the purpose of the knowledge. So when we are looking at causes, for the same event, we could look at multiple levels of causes. But we have to see which cause, so one event has happened. Now we could look at that event's cause in at multiple levels. What does that mean? Say, if I'm feeling cold, I could say, maybe I'm sitting under the fan, maybe sitting under the AC. I could say, maybe I'm not wearing warm enough clothes. Maybe the weather of this place is not suited for me. Maybe I've got fever. Maybe I've got some disorder in my body because of which I get chills constantly. Now, which of these explanations is valid? It depends. Start with the drishta and move toward the adrishta. If somebody is starting feeling very cold and they say, okay, what to do? This world is dukkhalaya. Well, that's not the most relevant explanation. The world is dukkhalaya, explanation can be applied for everything. Isn't it? See, generally, I'll conclude with this one last point. A philosophical point that can explain everything essentially explains nothing. Something that explains everything is not an explanation for anything. Okay, that it explains everything, but how is that to be applied? When is to be applied? So, does the philosophy of karma hold true? Of course it holds true. But when is it to be applied? That is, we have to be focused on what is our dharma. That has to be our focus. How can I serve Krishna in this situation? The dharma, of course, at multiple levels. And we are talking about Prabhupada quotes Sarva Dharman Parityaja in the conclusion of the purport that we read today. Our ultimate dharma is we want to serve Krishna. So, we want to think in every situation, how can I serve Krishna? And for serving Krishna, sometimes we may consider this explanation, whatever is happening to me is because of my past karma. And I'll accept it. Now, when to accept that I'll be discussing in tomorrow's session. But the key point is that is one of the explanations, and it is absolutely true as one of the explanations. The error is to make it the only explanation. When that happens, that is when we end up using philosophy to defeat the purpose of philosophy. So to summarize, I discussed 3 main points today. The first was weaponization of knowledge. Weaponization of knowledge that means when knowledge is used for some self-serving agendas. We discussed many examples of this, right, from Hiranyakashipu to the argument that no need to build a Ram temple because whatever happened is because of your own karma. Then why does this weaponization of knowledge happens? Because of knowledge in ignorance. So here I explained why. Normally, when knowledge increases, ignorance decreases. But in this case, the increase in knowledge leads to an increase in ignorance, because what is happening is, the knowledge is not growing multidimensionally. This kind of growth is good, but that knowledge is actually growing only in one dimension. Only one particular, okay, it's not proper. If I know this, then okay. Okay, so if this is there, basically the knowledge is growing only in one dimension. I know only one thing, and I get more and more evidences of one thing only. But what about other things we don't come to know about? We don't even seek to know about that. That is why lead to biases. And the last part is, we want to be dharma-centered, not karma-centered. So dharma-centered is that what is my dharma? And within that, we look at karma as one explanation. Now whether that explanation is the explanation to be used or not, that depends on what is it that is most constructive for my service. So we generally move from the drishta to the adrishta. And when the drishta explanations don't make sense, when they don't work, they don't apply, then we can look for adrishta and how to apply that adrishta in the choices that we make to respond to that situation. That we'll be discussing in tomorrow's session. Any questions or comments? Yes, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for such a scientific class. My question is regarding this: what is my dharma? So, in our topsy-turvy world, practically everywhere, like nobody has any clue what is there supposed to be dharma, and we are, in the context of Ram Rajya and Ram Mandir establishment, Shri Ram is Maryada Purushottam, no? So, but especially in our society, our ISKCON society also, many times and many, and so many lectures, we do not actually hear to understand how somebody is supposed to act and do all those things. So, how will we get the answer to this question? And another question that I'll ask.
See, first of all, we have to recognize that there are two different things going on. First is that, say for example, it is said we should do Krishna's will. That's one thing. And the other thing we also say it is very difficult to know Krishna's will. So is Krishna like a perverse God who tells us, if you don't do my will, you will suffer. And I won't tell you what is my will. That means Krishna is setting us up for suffering. Is it that if you do anything which is not dharma, you apply that from Krishna's will down to dharma also? We can say that dharma is very difficult to know. Okay, you have to do your dharma. And dharma is very difficult to do. If you do any dharma, adharma you will suffer. But it's Kali Yuga, dharma is going to be difficult to know. Does that mean we are meant to suffer? See, ultimately, the whole purpose of philosophy, of the Vedic philosophy, is to encourage individual responsibility. To encourage individual to take up responsibility. Responsibility, normally in the conventional sense, in the current contemporary sense, we use the word responsibility in terms of family responsibility, or this responsibility, or that responsibility. That's true, but it's much more. And I have to take responsibility to make the good choices. So with whatever intelligence we have, with whatever experience we have, if we use that to try to make the best choice we can within that situation. So like Arjuna trying to reach Jayadratha, he tried his best, he didn't succeed. And Krishna did. Krishna made up. So if we do what we can, Krishna will help us do what we can't. So don't worry too much about, in today's society, what is dharma? No, it doesn't really matter. Among the professions that we have, it's relatively easy. If somebody is making ethical shortcuts, doing corruption, that's adharma. If we are acting responsibly, if we are taking salary from a company, we need to make some contribution to the company. If we are working from the government, we are taking something, the basic principle of dharma is to be in harmony with whatever unit we belong to. Ultimately, we belong to Krishna and we will be in harmony with Krishna. So, the harmony means what? When is the relationship in harmony? It's when, when we are taking something and we are giving something. This harmony basically means that either we are expected to give more than what we get, or we are taking more than what we are giving. So, from any unit that we belong to, if we are taking something, we should be giving something. That is the basic principle of dharma. So we see, in my family, in my company, in my society, in my country, what am I taking and what am I giving back? That is the basic principle of dharma. So use our God-given intelligence and gradually things will become clearer.
Actually, probably maybe let me just clarify my question a little bit more. So, like when I was a child, there used to be a subject called moral science in the school, right? And likewise, it is said that even Pandavas has three kind of gurus. There was one Adhyatmic guru, and there was one material guru, and there was one family guru. So, my precise question would be ki, this dharma aspect of what somebody should do at what point in time, is it like learned by experience? It can be something which can be taught, either because of culture or because of somebody specific, giving some guidelines. Because this is relevant to the person in a particular time, place, circumstance, right? So it cannot be just, generalized and depending upon some individuals. Certain things are already given, established as per the Shastras or whatever. Is it correct understanding? Or?
See, there is scripture gives us broad guidelines about how to make decisions and how to live. It is not that scripture expects or demands that everyone make their brain like a super Google or super chat GPT so that they have every single reference from scripture known at all times. And for every action, Google reference, find it inside your brain and now do an action. That's not the way things work. So the idea is, through scripture is not so much about giving us like a micro level map as it is to give us a compass. So that now maps are important, no doubt. But what scripture essentially gives us is a compass. See, Krishna himself tells Arjuna, Mam ekam sharanam vraja. But that same Krishna we see in 1.7 in the 7th chapter of the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, when Arjuna has to decide what to do with respect to Ashwatthama. Now Krishna does not give him a decision. Krishna lets Arjuna take his decisions. And Krishna is in one sense preparing Arjuna for what is going to come 8 chapters later when Krishna departs from the world. So the idea is that we have to take individual responsibility. So doing God's will or doing dharma, it's not necessarily like one thin path. If you go off that path, you are gone forever. It's more like a general direction. And in that direction, if our purpose is to serve Krishna, we are using our intelligence, we are taking feedback from others, and we are taking Shastra as an input. So again, the point of scriptural study, it is not to outsource our intelligence to scripture. It is to reinforce our intelligence with scripture. They are two very different things. This is what happens generally speaking. Say like when some people use astrology. Okay, astrology can be one resource for your decision making. But many times people outsource the responsibility of decision making to the astrologer. That is very unhealthy. So Krishna does not expect that Arjuna, when he surrenders, Arjuna should be outsourcing his intelligence to Krishna. You see, subsequently in the Kurukshetra war, it is not that before shooting every arrow, Arjuna is asking Krishna, Krishna, can I shoot? Krishna, can I shoot this arrow? Can I shoot this arrow? Can I shoot this arrow? No, Arjuna is his own person. Arjuna is taking his decisions. Now Krishna is there and Krishna does intervene and guide at specific times. Arjuna asks Krishna at specific times. But so doing Krishna's will. See, the Gita is a very practical book. The Gita is not saying that to follow it, you have to come to a particular level of purity where you will have a direct connection with God in your heart, and after that only you will know what is the right thing to do. It is wanting us to develop our compass, and for that we need to study, we need to connect with the resources that will develop our compass. So scripture is also one resource. Those who are trying to live their life according to scripture is also an important resource. But the point is, we have to develop our compass.
Yes, thank you. I just one more question. So regarding that Mataji who had a biological problem and then there was a cure found out and then ultimately it happened. But my question is, Prabhuji, that as time progresses there will be so many more problems which will come up, and there are modern scientists who are trying to find solutions to practically every problem, and they might actually even do it. For example, bionic eye, bionic leg, so many things they are working on. So is it adharmic or dharmic? Like, is it they are doing it in a right manner or wrong manner?
See, that's not so easy to decide. Ultimately, ethics is a big subject. So there is the content of the action, what action you are doing. There is the intent of the action, and then there is the consequence of the action. What we are doing, why we are doing, and what is the result of what we are doing. So, say 10-20 years ago, the general opinion among the devotee community, for example, consider organ donation. It was, let nature take its course. No, don't. That means, the body is going to be destroyed in its own way. Let it be destroyed. No need to artificially intervene in that. So I had asked several devotees about 20 years ago, several senior leaders, including sannyasis and gurus. Their general mood was that let nature play its course. But then, now if I talk with about it, many devotees have a slightly different opinion. I was talking with one devotee. He said that one sannyasi guru. He said that you have already left that body. If somebody has died, why are you so attached that you want to control what happens to your body after you have left the body? He said, you focus on the next destination. And if with your body some good can be done to someone, why not? So, most people, many devotees were really thoughtful. Somebody who thought about it, most devotees now are moving towards, if I die, I'm okay with I would like my organs to be donated if they can be used. That's an individual decision. We don't have to have the institution giving a guideline. So now as I said, intent, content and consequence. In terms of content, In one sense, say you are giving charity. Giving charity with our own bodily organs. You could find precedents for that in terms of Shibi gave as part of his body for charity. Even when he was alive, what to speak of when he's dead. So that's good. Now you could say that, no, it's unnatural. Okay, see the division between natural and unnatural is not so easy to decide. If you get a heart attack, 20, 30, maybe 50 years ago, 100 years ago, a heart attack means if a person's heart stops beating, that means the person is dead. But now you do CPR, now there are defibrillators everywhere, in airports they keep defibrillators. Many temples also, especially big temples, they are saying that you should have defibrillators. So the idea is that, is a defibrillator natural or unnatural? The heart has stopped beating, you are giving some electric shock to make the heart beat again. So is that natural, is that unnatural? How do you decide that? That way, where do you stop natural and Ayurvedic medicines we take is natural. Well, if you take the literal definition of natural, those medicines in those combinations don't occur in nature. You have to acquire them and you have to artificially mix them in precise quantities. So, if it's man-made intervention, does it make it natural? Does it make it unnatural? No, man-made intervention using human intelligence. When the human intelligence has been given to us by God, does it make it natural or is it unnatural? So with respect to this, there are devotees who are very, traditionally they say all of this is unnatural. The others who say no, ultimately we can see in scientific advancement also, it is scientific advancement is seen as humans defying God. It can also be seen as humans using the intelligence that has been given to them by God to face life. Now the problem comes when we focus on material solutions at the expense of spiritual solutions. When you start thinking material solutions are be all and all and therefore there's no need for spiritual solutions. That is when it becomes a problem. So consider organ donation. So from the content perspective, one side is it's charitable. So it's good. From the natural perspective, it's a hazy line. Now what would be considered natural and what would be considered unnatural? Now, there are some devotees who may focus more on the intent and some may focus more on the consequence. Some devotees focus on the intent. As I said, why are you so attached to your body? Your body is going to go to the fire. If it does something good for someone, why not? The intent is to benefit someone. You could say, if I give my eyes, maybe that person will take darshan of Krishna and become a devotee. And I am doing it so that that person can have a better life. Somebody else may say, you give your eyes and that person uses it for some obscene activity or something, you'll get the karma for that. Now that they are focusing more on the consequence. So which to focus on? So content, intent and consequence, all three are there. So in the past, the overall ethos was that there was, the focus was more on the naturality aspect and the consequence aspect, but now it is more on the intent aspect and more on the principle of, as I said, it's a charitable activity. So I think this is an individual decision. Dharma cannot be mandated by any institution. So that's why when the vaccines came up, should devotees take vaccines or not? Well, it's not that the institution is supposed to micro-control people. Then they'll give broad guidelines. And each choice will have its consequences. And if an individual is making a particular choice, they will have to live with the consequences of that. But dharma is not that simple. And dharma is not meant to be mandated necessarily. Some areas, of course. See, there are definitely areas like, say, meat eating, intoxication, gambling, illicit sex. There are areas which are clearly adharmic. That's true. But within that, on the broad frame where there are shades of grey, where a particular person wants to be, that's up to that person to decide. Okay? Thank you. Just one quick question. Okay. So, we'll stop here. Thank you so much. Grantraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande.